Record. All right. I'm here with the regular, the immigrant hater, the guy that wants my wife deported, Kyle Matovic. What's up, dude?
Oh, nothing, man. She could probably say she's been here long enough and she's married. So, maybe like most of the married immigrants who like look half decent and can cook, they could stick around.
She goes, I said, yeah, I got to record with Kyle here in a little bit. And she goes, oh, you're recording with that immigrant hater?
Listen, you have had much, much worse people on your show than me. I am mild compared to some other people. Some people I like, and I know they know exactly who they are, but they're much more brutal than me.
Yeah, but she doesn't see that.
Uh,
She saw you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess, I do have a bad habit of sticking my head up a little bit more than other people and being a little bit more mouthy. Maybe, maybe not, but yeah, maybe that's the way I see it.
All right. Well, this is the first. Okay, so this is the first podcast I'm recording since the new year.
Mhm.
Um, both the ones I've released since the beginning of the year has started. I recorded last year, uh, the last week of December. I recorded with Gord and Typo, so I have
I
not.
I saw that, and I literally like right before I was coming up here to get everything started, I'm like, oh, he'd record with Typo, man. So
Yeah,
gonna
it
have
just
to.
released. Actually, Adam was supposed to come on too, but he ended up having something going on, and wasn't able to make it on because I was going to do Typo and Adam. So,
Uh,
but yeah, so he wasn't able to make it though. Um,
mm,
but one of this time of year, I'm always thinking about a book I read called The Myth of Eternal Return,
mm.
and I haven't read it in a couple of years, but I always think about it, and I think about like the celebrations that people are having around the New Year, and how it relates to so many early traditions. And so the earliest tradition, from what I can understand, based on the book, is the New Year. Like it was like giving birth to a new world is the way they
Hmm.
looked at it. So they viewed they it's very similar to like the Orthodox faith and the way that we celebrate the liturgy, right? It's all cyclical. So every year we do the same things. And we're keeping the same feasts, and we're following the patterns of Christ through the liturgical, cycle. And that's kind of the way that everybody looked at the way the year went. It was like it was cyclical. So like when the new year came around, right? And you start getting the days start getting a little bit longer and longer and longer. It's like the birth of a new world is the way they looked at it. So they were celebrating the end of an old world and the birth of a new world. And that's what New Year actually was really like, the celebration around it. That's kind of where it started. It was this festival they would have in celebrating the birth of a new world.
Hmm. Okay.
And I think that's where the whole resolution thing came from. And I
Yeah.
think it's still kind of like mimetically alive in people. And that's why so many people get so excited about a new year, new year, new me type deal.
That was exactly where my mind was going, actually, funny enough, is that I always see people complain about like the gyms being full and stuff like that. But you know, I I think I've successfully actually beaten that kind of habit out of me to be like, oh, the gyms are full. I kind of look at it as like, people are going to take a genuine shot at improving themselves. And you could say, yeah, you should just get started today. But like, if people are hyped up and their motivation's high in the beginning of the new year and they want to dedicate themselves to something, I think the correct action is to push them in that direction and say, hey, you got it. Just continue to be consistent. And, I do like the idea of kind of ringing in the new year with some kind of celebration because it is one more revolution around the sun. So whether you look at that from more of a atheistic position, I was trying to think of the word, a secular position, that's it, or religious perspective, I think either way, it's kind of like, well, you got another year to kind of make things right. And I think I said in a couple shows I did recently, like 2024 was I never say that the years are bad because I think if you say a year was a bad year, I don't think it's the year. I actually I would put money on it that it's never the year that was bad. You may have had ups and downs throughout the year, but I don't think any year is bad because at least for me, I'm a relatively optimistic person. The year on net was not as good as other years have been, But I think this year's going to be a lot better for me. And there's some stuff that I don't want to discuss quite yet on the out for the world to hear yet. But either way, I think 2025 is going to be a really, really good year. And I think most people, even regardless of like political stuff and including political stuff, I think a lot of people are kind of looking at this year as kind of like, it feels different. I hate to say the vibe shift, but the vibe shift kind of is a real thing.
Well, who was I talking to with about this? Was it Buck I was talking to
Yeah, it was Buck.
about, yeah, about when I got back from Namibia and how everything just
Yes.
felt so different. Um, you know, yeah, I mean, there's that, but I don't know if it's my age or my experiences, like what I've been through life. Like I think Buck and I discussed this too, is to me, things just are. It's like, it's not good, it's not bad. It just is, And like, so it's just like shit happens and sometimes you got to deal with it. And then sometimes nothing's happening and that's okay too. And then sometimes really good shit's happening and that's okay too. It's just the way it is, man. And it goes
Yeah,
back to that whole cycle, right? It
sure.
happens in cycles, because like it's like there's this whole like adage about like everything comes in threes, right? And so like and it's actually like proves true more than not. Like it's usually if I know somebody that passes away, I usually over the next few months, two or three more people actually pass away, you know? And but it's just like understanding and like having the perspective on life that it isn't like I think that whenever you take it personally, then you're just showing how much of a narcissist you actually are
Mm,
because the world is not out to get you. Life is happening to everybody. It's like
right.
you're not some like there's not something genuinely like unique about you. Like
Yes.
everybody has all this crap going on. And this is where the whole
Yeah.
kind of idea of like the whole snowflake idea came from is people thinking they're like uniquely special or and
Mhm.
I you are to a degree, but like, not
Your
the
life
world doesn't
circumstances
well, the
aren't.
world doesn't
Oh,
revolve
yeah.
around you. And
Right.
and and through the like the early 2000s, and I think this is what people were trying to get at, like Bob and Tom, they would talk about the pussification of America, right? In the 2000s on their morning show. And
Mhm.
helicopter parenting was like the the code of the day. This is what everybody was talking
Yeah.
about. And what these parents did is they brought into the reality this whole generation of children that believe that the world revolves around them because they just were the central focus of everything
Yeah.
when they were growing up. And you know, I understand that like parents love their children and they want their children to know that they're loved, but you can overdo it.
Yeah.
Like your children do need to be able to like I raised my kids like I was raised. So I they would spend most of the days outside riding bikes on the street and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like nowadays people would look at that as if it's like controversial. And it's like, no, it's just that's the way I was raised. And I know like when I was growing up, I wanted some freedom. I wanted some room to breathe and to experiment and to, figure out who I was and how community structures and how you organize within, on like basically voluntarily to go back to some libertarian ideas, but how you
Hmm.
would organize society, within yourself. Jordan Peterson talks about like children playing games, and
Right.
how that teaches them how to interact with each other on the world.
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of like the way that I looked at it. It was like they need to be out there. They need to be socializing. They don't need to be up mom and dad's ass all the time, being coddled. That's not good for them, you know. But
Yeah.
it was a very popular thing to do whenever I was raising my children. It felt like I was one of the only parents in the neighborhood who had their children outside playing, you know.
Yeah, and a lot that you're touching on there is funny. It's like kind of going in my brain too. Like when you mentioned the whole snowflake thing, and this may piss some people off, and I'm okay with that. But like when Vivek kind of laid out his whole thing about H-1B visas, said there's a cultural problem here in America. I think a lot of people kind of missed his point in that, and I understand because like it's a really hot topic, but at the same time, I'm sure a lot of those same people who are criticizing him have used the term snowflake generation before, the participation trophy, where it's like, no, like you said,
Yeah.
you're not entirely special. The circumstance of your life, other people have been through it, other people have been through worse, other people have been through better. Don't look at yourself as like the lone man who has done everything that no one has ever done before. Like like you said, the whole world doesn't revolve around you. And when you start to kind of think more in that way of like the world doesn't revolve around me, then you can kind of empathize with people a little bit more, and people will empathize a little bit more with you. And I think that's a lot more constructive than rather than just being so focused on like, oh, this year was so awful for me. Like, no, like you said, things just are, man. At the beginning of the year last year, told my car, Axton, who's just happily chewing a bone right here, he fucked up his paw pretty damn good. It scared the living
Right.
shit out of me. There was blood everywhere.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, shit
Yeah, I
turned out
remember
okay
telling you
though.
about when Boogie fucked up his paw, and we were talking
Yeah.
about that because that was like right before the first Childeberg I ever went to. So he spent like 3 weeks with a sock wrapped around his foot because I was trying to keep the gauze on there, and he would
E-
want to lick on it, you know. And
mm,
so I had to gauze it up and bandage it, and then I would put a sock, like a small
mhm.
sock that it was like one of Beatrix's old socks. I would put it up around there, and I would tape it,
Mhm.
up at the top so it would kind of snug up at the top, and so he couldn't lick the gauze off. He
Yeah.
was stuck licking the sock. Yeah, I remember all that.
We put a cone on Axton, and normally he stays in his bed when we're at work, but we put him down in the basement, and he just raised hell. He pissed and shit down there a couple times. Sarah has videos of some of this stuff. There was a shirt hanging off our table where we put some of our laundry, and he bit the shirt, pulled it off. He was like climbing on the TV down there. He was all over the place. He was being a fucking nut. And then the one thing I forgot to mention was 2 days before Christmas. I mean, this crushed me for probably a good 3 or 4 days, but we had to put down our old girl Posh, and that
Oh,
really sucked. That really,
yeah.
really sucked. But the 18-year-old dog, can you really be upset? I mean, we gave her the best 3 years of her life, so I would do it 100 times over again. But yeah, I mean, you don't know how hard it is until you go through it. Like,
Yeah.
much kind of like we were just saying, and this kind of shows my own arrogance here, but I was kind of like, oh yeah, the day's gonna come, and I'll be fine with it. We're gonna have to put Posh down, and it just is gonna be what it is. It's gonna suck, but I'll get over it real quick. Oh my God, I bawled like a fucking baby, and I'll be
Yep.
man enough to admit it. It was it was in the morning. I picked her up. She felt a little bit light, but not enough to throw me off. So I didn't think anything of it. Put her down outside. She did her business. She came inside. She pooped in the house, and whatever, no big deal. I could pick that up, no problem. Sarah had her out and said that she had diarrhea, and she was like meowing. It was very, very strange, but it wasn't weird enough to me to really throw anything off. I tried to get her to eat her food and she wasn't eating. So I'm like, okay, maybe she's not hungry. Still seemed a little weird, but not too weird. So we laid her down in front of the vent in our dining room, right in front of where Lily's bowl is. And she was just laying there and she started squirming around. So I figured she needed to go out. I'm like, okay, whatever. I'll pick her up and put her outside. Set her down outside and just she shit straight blood. And that broke me for the day. I
Yeah.
mean, I cried for the rest of the day. We took her down to the vets and we put her down, but we got like a little paw thing. They sent us some of her fur, and everything's good. I'm kind of glad that that's all said and done. But yeah, it was about a good 2 or 3, or up until about Christmas, I want to say that I was pretty bent out of shape about it. But obviously now everything's fine. But appreciate the time you got. But the main point being, I heard all my friends talk about, oh yeah, I didn't want to get a dog again. It's so hard. I'm like, ah, yeah, I'll be fine. I wasn't fine.
I didn't when Pinky died, I didn't want to get another dog. And I went 2 weeks like over the road by myself without a dog, and I couldn't sleep. I just
Wow.
couldn't sleep. I was so used because you know you're out there, you're by yourself, and I was so used to having him with me, and I
Yeah.
just could not sleep. And so I was like, I finally just told Beatrix, I was like, I'm gonna have to get another dog. I was like, I can't sleep. I got to do something. Um, you know, and she was like, yeah, okay, if you want to. And then we knew Slayer was getting older. I didn't know how much longer I was going to be driving over the road. I didn't know if Slayer was going to make it until I stopped driving over the road. So we ended up getting Butters and Boogie out of the same litter.
Well,
So
Slayer passed away. What was that? Like 2 years ago, was it?
yeah, it was 2 years ago this past November.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
that would have you uh Booger and Butters are how old?
They'll be five. They just turned 5.
Okay, so you probably had them probably about 2 or 3 years before
Yeah,
you and I started
I got
talking.
them in 2019. Slayer died in
Yeah.
2022.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
I came home in 2021. I started driving locally in 2021. So,
Gotcha.
yeah, so it was a few years.
Yeah. Yeah, like
But
I said, the whole point for me was just I'm like, yeah, I'll be ready when Posh dies. But she had also been a part of my family for over 10 years. I mean, I remember being a teenager, being excited to go to my aunt's house because she had her, and I'm like, oh, she's such an awesome dog. And
yeah.
just, when she finally came to live with my wife and I was like, this is pretty cool. And I do remember over the summer, it was the first time, or no, it might have been last winter. Either way, I drove my Monte Carlo for the first time to my work. It was a nice day in the middle of winter, and I had like a real emotional moment. I couldn't explain exactly what came over me, but I was driving home, and Posh always loved to like stick her head out the window. I had my Monte Carlo, the T-tops were off, and obviously the windows are down, and she was standing out of the Monte Carlo, and we're driving down. It's like a real country road that I take to go home. Like when I first leave my job. And I remember looking over and seeing her stick her head out there. I'm like, this may be one of the last times I get to see her do this. And surely enough, a couple months later, they told me, all right, you can't take Posh to work anymore. And okay, whatever, that's fine. But just like something about that specific moment just really got to me.
Mm,
And I'm glad I got to share it with her.
yeah. 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 Well, and so this actually brings me to something else that was on my mind earlier. I wanted to kind of talk about because I think part of what we're seeing, like with the change in society and culture and the mindset, there seems to be, and a lot of people are talking about this, like this kind of like reawakening to like mythology, to Christianity, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's something even more, I can't say it's more important than that, but there's something else going on here that I've noticed. And I think it started with podcasters. And I
Mm,
think there's like this okay, so in the Orthodox tradition, historically, the way things went was when you went to confession, it was a public confession. You stood in front of the congregation and you confessed in front of like everybody. Now
mm,
there was, you know, there's good and bad to this. Like you can look at it in multiple ways. Like, and it's hard for us to imagine this in our society because of the way that like that we operate so materialistically in our society, and there's so much shame that comes with things. But I think there's also some realization that, like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm like other people are dealing with these kind of struggles. There's all this other stuff that, like, there's other people that are dealing with this, so I don't feel so shameful in
mm,
the struggles that I'm having, right? And I've noticed that, like, it's almost like in vogue. I don't know if in vogue is the right way to say it, but it's becoming more popular for people to talk more openly about struggles they're having and about
mm.
the struggles in life, you know. And you know, we grew up growing up watching like the news and these reporters that were on the news. They were so like pretentious and like holier than thou.
Right.
I had the exact same experience. I can't say exact same, but a very similar experience with people in congregations at churches whenever I was growing up going to Protestant churches. I don't know if this is a Protestant like issue or if this is an issue that runs, you know, throughout um, all religions in some way, shape, or form. But it seems like recently, and I don't know what it is, but I'd say over the last few years, I've noticed that people are getting a lot more open about struggles and about life and about the difficulties that they're dealing with. And this kind of like authentic ability to have these conversations about the imperfections of one's, character or flaws, your shortcomings in life or whatever, is becoming like a lot more acceptable to discuss. And I think that's a good thing on whole.
Hmm. I That's not quite the direction that I thought you were going to take that. It almost I agree that it's definitely like podcasting and kind of hearing people talk. And that's a really weird way to put it, but like now, instead of people just listening to like talk shows, where you hear somebody talk on a radio, you're listening to people have full length conversations like we're doing right now, where it is like you're almost a fly on the wall for a lot of these conversations anymore.
I always say
And
people are listening to my phone calls. It's
yeah,
weird having thousands of people wanting to listen to my phone calls.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. Um, the other thing is that like it does seem like religion back for I want to say probably like the early 2000s up until relatively recently I don't want to say it was like passe or taboo, but it wasn't quite as like culturally mainstream now, and not even necessarily like mainstream, but like there seems to be a lot less of that like stigma around it. And then like also I think it's a lot of like the intellectual dark web, the atheists, right, of kind of like the early 2000s. There's no like great secular thinkers that are like relevant anymore. You know what I mean? So I think that kind of culture going away kind of goes to your point
Well, there
of
are. I mean, like John Vervaeke, he's secular. I mean, he's a
sure.
Buddhist, but he's always talking to like Jonathan Pajot, who's an Orthodox
I
Christian.
was gonna say I've never even heard that. Jonathan, what is it?
John Vervaeke.
Vervaeke. Yeah, never heard of him.
Yeah. Yeah. And but he's like Buddhist, but he's
Mm.
like but he's interested in having conversations about Christianity with
Yeah,
like Jonathan Pajot,
right. I
which, it's kind of like I don't know, like it seems like there's like a healing that's occurring.
right. Yeah, and it's really tough to say what that's a consequence of, but I do agree that like
Well, I think it's a consequence of the failures of like liberalism and atheism. Like it just like
what's
it's become
yeah.
so obvious how empty these ideals are that you're like,
Mhm.
okay, that's it. That's all there is.
Yeah, okay, so that was actually right where my mind went to, funny enough, is that like I think people realize that like hardcore individualism, as in like kind of what we were talking about earlier, where like, oh, you are a black queer trans woman, or like you as a cis white male, and kind of looking at yourself through like this Marxist identity of like where you fit in this whole oppression hierarchy. People eventually probably found that to be relatively like shallow and like. There's not a lot of, I hate to say meaning because that tends to be a container word, as in like people are just going to fill that with whatever they want it to be. I think that people found that like just hitching your entire personality on your identity in that respect didn't bring them a lot of joy or like didn't make their lives, extensively better. And, for me at least, and I was funny enough, a friend of mine had just called me yesterday and asked, like, oh, well, my girlfriend and I are on a break. So what should I do? I'm like, okay, well, now I think you should join a gym. You should get back to work and just keep doing that stuff. And he's like, is that it? I'm like, yeah, because like for me, I know I'm not worried about, the world political theater or foreign policy or even the worst problems that may be going on between my wife and I if I'm busy, when I got 300 pounds on my back and I'm squatting in the hole. If I'm playing a show, if I'm busy, I'm not worried about anything. So that was kind of like my message to him is that like get busy. And like if your girlfriend right now wants a break and this kid's 22, I'm like, just go. Like live your life, dude. There'll be plenty more. And like you have a lot to do yourself that could keep you busy. And you would be amazed at the opportunities that open for you if you choose to dedicate yourself to, more than just kind of laying around the house and your girlfriend right now. Like there's such a great world out there and so many great people that would love to see someone like you develop themselves into someone better.
Yeah, but all right, like yeah, I don't think meaning is it's just like the whole like hedonistic lifestyle was it's like so devoid of purpose, right?
Right.
It's like you're pleasing like uh, materialistically, like you're pleasing yourself, like fleshly, you know, with whatever, but you're not fulfilling like anything intellectually or spiritually. Like you're just like completely abandoned like
Mhm.
those aspects of the person. And it's just
Yeah.
like, okay, so you're just like this blob of hedonistic, like, what? Like,
Yeah.
you might as well just be a porn star, OnlyFans model,
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't understand, you know? But, and so, like, yeah, when it comes to like a 22-year-old like that, like talking, I did the same thing, I think, like, whenever I was in my relationships when I was younger. And like, I put so much because there was no other, there was nothing else fulfilling going on in life that was because it was so taboo to be like a devout Christian, or it was, you know, whatever. I wasn't going to college. I had kids, you know, when I was 19 years old. And it was just like I had to like fill in those voids within my life. And I think that's what the kid's asking for. He's like, how do I fill this void? Because this gave me like some sort of purpose, something meaningful that was beyond. It was like the relationship is bigger than me, right? Because it's two of us. And now that the
right.
relationship's gone, I don't have anything bigger than me because like he's probably, you know, even if he is like Christian, just that mindset, he's probably has more of a materialistic secular mindset. So he doesn't have like that larger than life, larger than the world figure to look to in Christ or in God. And so he's always looking for something on the material level. And the problem is, and I'm not saying that like it's like wrong to work out. I don't
Yeah.
think that's necessarily true. I think that like working out can be very good for people. Um, but it can also be like cancerous to your mentality if you do it for the wrong reasons, right?
Sure.
If you're like extremely focused on vanity and it's all about me, right?
Mhm.
And then you turn into one of those people that make yourselves the center of the world, right? And so people have to be careful when they're attacking these materialistic kind of like ideals, like that they're doing it for the right reasons. And so it's not bad to have that kind of materialistic purpose, but there's such a void spiritually. I think that it's like really people are struggling to find how to fill that.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I want to touch on when you mentioned hedonism is that, like, when you get a dose of, let's say, heroin or, that one night stand or something like that, you never stop
Well,
there, right?
even more of a concern in our modern day with social media is dopamine.
Yeah. Well, yeah, once again, once you get that first post or once again that first high, it's like, okay, well, this post got 10 likes. Okay, well, how good would it feel if I got 15? What about 30? What about 60? What about 100? What about 1,000? What about, if I get this tweet to a million views? And like, I'm not saying I'm above this because I'm not. I don't think anybody who gets on social media really is 100% above it. Now, there are definitely people who handle it much, 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 much better than me, and I'm sure most other people. But like, with that, it never stops. And, a lot of pursuits can be kind of like that where you never get content necessarily. Now, that's not like a bad impulse, as in like that ability to want to be more and do better isn't a bad impulse, but it can be used for nefarious purposes.
Right.
And
It
I
can
think
lead to
that's kind of the push you
destruction.
get to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like Beatrix and I always joke about like social media because like yeah, I don't know if you remember, it was like 10 years ago there was this commercial that came out. It was this guy and he's like 1,000 likes on my selfie, you know, and he's like going crazy.
Yeah.
And so like if Beatrix gets like 10 likes, she's like, "Oh my God, I'm going viral." You know, it's like we're always goofing off about that because it's just like to us, it's like it means so little in the scheme of things, right? You bury your nose in social media, and this is why you don't see me on social media that often. Is like it doesn't really mean that much to me. It's like
Mhm.
it's kind of this abstract world that's like kind of out there, and I know it's there, but it's like, okay, whatever. It does when I look outside, like it doesn't affect my life in any real like way. And so I guess I'm just at an age where I'm just like, oh, okay, I'm just like worried about what I can do to, bring more peace and prosperity to my world, those around me, and not necessarily care so much about what John B. Job 566213 has to say about what
First name, bunch of numbers.
yeah. Like I don't really care.
Mm. Yeah, and it is frustrating to a point for me because like obviously the biggest thing for me outside of obviously those closest to me is my musical endeavors and then health and fitness. Like those are the two things that I really try to channel a lot of people into. Specifically like the music stuff. Like I don't promote it much on Twitter because like let's face it, I almost get like no traffic on that kind of stuff. And it sucks that that's the way it is, but like I love being around people. So I don't know if you know his at on Twitter is Hexcelerate and then Adam and Alice
Hmm.
Forkey. Um they actually came out to come see A Common Crown when we played out in Ohio because it was like 45 minutes away from them. And like that was just awesome. I enjoyed meeting them, hanging out with them for a night so much. I never met them before. So and then I've told you before, Red Hawk and we've met up 3 or 4 times now. And over the summer, I'm sure we're gonna do it again. But like just shit like that is so much cooler. So like for me, one of my favorite things about social media and kind of doing what we do here is the opportunity to meet more people. And I mean, I'm a very, very gregarious person. I love talking to people. I love spending time with people. I love doing stuff with people. So, like, using that as an extension to build a network and make more meaningful relationships is great. But, if you're using that as like a barometer for meaning and like how much people care about you, I think that's a very, very toxic way to kind of look at social media is that like my worth is completely dependent upon my followers, how many likes I get on my post, and all this and that. Whereas, like, I think the more constructive way is to just, hey, this is like Twitter's like a phone book, right? Where like, oh, all these people follow me, I follow these people, I can message the person right now, and we can kind of talk about stuff or whatever. So like obviously, I think the most productive way to kind of look at that is like, oh, Twitter's like a means to an end. It's a funnel where like you're trying to get people either towards a product, towards an event or something like that, or you're looking to kind of use that to network and get to know other people who have similar goals, interests, and a general outlook as you.
Yeah, but again, it's not it can also be one of those things that leads to destruction too though, right?
Yes.
Because what does it rewards it rewards narcissism
Hmm.
to a certain degree. Like you're out there and you're talking and you go viral, right? And maybe you say something like obscure or innocuous that you don't think much of, and you say it, and then a lot of people like tap into it, and you get like this high on it, and you're like, oh crap, well, I want to do that again. And so now you're spending all your time trying to figure out how do I do that again? What do I say this time? How do I get that same type of reaction? And it gives you like this kind of like false sense of like self-importance,
Hmm.
right? It's like I saw somebody talking to it was us. Jay Dyer had retweeted this guy that had it was this Muslim guy that he had challenged to a debate, and the guy was like, "Well, you only have 400,000 followers on Twitter, so like,
Right.
why would I waste my time?" And it's
Right.
like, what makes you think that you're that important? Just because a
Right.
bunch of like, yeah, like how many of those that follow you are bots? Like you don't know, like, like I mean, so I just kind of like, uh, and it's funny because I'll get on there and I'll see just like it's just it's a cesspool where
Totally.
you get these guys that like let's say like a James Lindsay who get this kind of like or Michael Malice or some of these guys they get this like self-importance about them like what they say has some sort of like real like large like meaning on the culture at hand and it's like okay, fine. But And it's like, all right, if you want to think that about yourself, that's fine. I don't want to fill my feed or my mind with a bunch of people who have this kind of like self-important kind of like ideal about themselves. And then you get the exact opposite reaction where people just start attacking them. And it's like, look, man, you never know like what's going to happen. You could turn around over the next 6 months and gain 1 million followers because you released like the right type of material that just draws in a big crowd.
Mm.
And the next thing you know, there are going to be those small accounts attacking you like that. So just
Yeah.
let it be, man. Just let those people be. If you don't like what they're saying, just ignore them. There's no reason to be attacking them because you're doing like for the most part, these people aren't seeing what you're saying. And a bunch of angry, bitter people are patting you on the back, giving you these accolades for saying ridiculous shit that is doing nothing but harming you. Because now, like you got this nonsense spewing out of your mouth. You're filling your life with bitterness and with hate towards somebody for what? Because they have hold an opinion that you disagree with. I was like, you're just doing harm to yourself. I remember whenever I'd gone through my first divorce, man, I was like, it took me a long time to get over that. And not like depression or anything like that. I was genuinely angry. I was like full of rage, full of hate, full of bitterness.
Yeah.
And I was talking to somebody and the subject of my ex-wife came up and I was like, man, fuck that bitch, blah, 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 blah. And who knows what all I was saying. And the guy goes, look, man, she doesn't know that you're saying this. Like what you're saying is having no effect on her whatsoever. The only person that what you're saying is affecting is yourself. You're only fueling your own destruction because you are giving her control over your mind, over your mentality, over your spirituality, over, your well-being, your mental health, and she doesn't even care. Like you have no like there's no importance on her life. And maybe that's not the case. Maybe she was feeling the exact same way about me, but him saying that like made me realize that me feeding that anger, fueling all that anger and that bitterness was only giving her power over me. It was making her a constant like fixture in my mind of like in anytime you're seeking like vengeance or you're holding wrath or vengeance towards another person, that's all you're doing is you're giving that person control over your own like mental like kind of well-being. And so this is like what kind of where that idea of like, oh, I live rent free in your mind came from. It's like
Right.
I mean, that says it perfectly. Like I am living in your head and like I'm controlling you. I'm controlling your actions, your attitude, the way that you're engaging with life. I have control over a portion of that. Maybe not
Mhm.
100% of it, but I do have some sort of like control over you. And I remember that being told to me and I was just like, "Oh wow." And that was a big moment in like just letting go of all that anger and rage and all that bitterness and
Yeah.
just coming to the point where I could say, I forgive, you know, like whether you ask for forgiveness or not, I can forgive and not be angry towards you. Because what's really the most important thing that came out of this, whether we're together or not, is the kids. And I got to be, like someone, I would never talk shit about my wives, my ex-wives in front of my kids. But at the same time, I'm sure if their mother's name came up or something, they could just feel the venom, the rage
Right.
coming off of me. I didn't really necessarily have to say those things. You give off auras and different kind of like, vibes whenever certain subjects come up. And I didn't want to be that person that gave off those types of vibes to my children, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very bad cycle to be in. And I when my mom used to talk about how her and my dad split up, and, obviously we're talking years later now, but like it was always kind of funny how sometimes the preamble would always be, I never took a dime off your dad. Your dad was great, but it's like
Yeah.
everything up until that but doesn't really matter. But like
Right.
you said, I think we as people are very, very attuned to like our own intuition and how other people are reacting to what we're saying, and to kind of how you could tell someone feels like right before they're about to say something. Um, and I'm sure for you, when your ex-wife came up around your kids, it's kind of like you don't want your kids to feel that kind of dispassion or anger, because that's not the world you want them to understand. Like, anger is a social emotion. You don't ever stub your toe and then scream ouch and then get angry by yourself. Like, or when somebody misses subway, right? You never see somebody just miss a subway by themselves and just, do the whole, ugh, they look
I'll
around.
be honest. I've never stubbed my toe and screamed ouch. I've screamed some vulgarities, but not ouch.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, me too, me too. But we are validation seeking creatures for the most part, and sometimes killing that. And this goes to another point I wanted to make, actually, was like not being led by the nose or by the tail. As much as I love Toad, him and I kind of got into a little bit of an argument about this, and it's always good fun with Toad, but like he was saying, oh, being a contrarian gets you to the truth or something like that. I'm like, not always. Like, you need to kind of think for yourself. And this is kind of what I was picking up from what you were putting down here, is that like you being angry and resentful about your wife is letting her lead you by the nose,
Mm,
right? Because you are still giving her control. And then being a contrarian against the people that you hate still gives them power over you because they're setting the terms, right?
hmm.
Why
Yeah.
don't you decide for yourself what you find is true? And like, obviously, correct yourself as necessary, but like, don't just look at what, the shit libs are saying or the Republicans, wherever you stand politically or in any issue. Don't look at the people who you disagree with and then say, okay, 100% of what they're saying, the 180-degree opposite is true, because that's not always going to be the case. You can kind of establish what you find to be most true or what you believe in from kind of getting a wide variety of sources and then kind of coming to the truth that way, right?
Well, this is why like being like a voluntarist or anarchist was kind of like I found it to be cancerous to me
Mm,
because I allowed it to kind of like dictate the terms in which I thought. And I was miserable the entire time. I was always miserable because I was always looking for a reason to hate government more than I already hated them. Right.
yeah.
It was like
Not hard
every
to do though.
right. But anytime somebody would say something, I'd be like, yeah, well, screw the government, blah, 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 blah. And I would go off on these tirades and I noticed that I was just miserable. I was just unhappy. Like I would get to points where I didn't even want to record podcasts. I didn't want to listen to news. I didn't want to do anything that had to do with like politics because it made me so unhappy to like acknowledge its existence. You were about to say something. But I was just
Yeah, I mean, I think that's. Oh no, no, that's all right. It kind of lagged there for a second, but like,
oh.
I think kind of deloading, mentally is important as well. And this is something that I try to pass on to people because, and especially coming into a new year, it's nice to have your motivation being super high, right? Like, as in, you're motivated, you want to rock and roll, and you're ready. Like you said earlier, new year, new me. Um, at the same time, you can't go 100% of the time. You eventually got to kind of reel it back a little bit. Like this morning, I think I was listening to the Gray Zone or something like that. And I think at a certain point I saw Bleeding Through put out a new single, and like all these bands now do these singles where they like release one song and then they'll release another song, but they'll like when you click on the single on whatever app, they have like both the singles there. So I saw they released, I can't remember what the hell the song was, but anyways, like it had all three of their new singles on. I'm like, you know what? I think I want to listen to that right now. Like some mornings, I just want to tune out and listen to music the whole drive in. So like,
Mm.
I'm kind of discovering my love for Slayer recently, because I used to hate Slayer, but now I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty badass. So, um, I was listening to like Arise by Sepultura, Spiritual Healing and Leprosy by Death, and then Rain and Blood, and I think it's Seasons in the Abyss by Slayer. I had that all in like one big playlist, and just
That's a good
it's
playlist.
cool.
I mean,
Oh, incredible.
I'm not a huge Slayer fan, and I like to make
Yeah.
fun of Slayer fans, but yeah, no, that's a good playlist. Like, there's nothing wrong with that
Yeah.
playlist. You know, I can't deal with like I can't listen to a whole Slayer album because
Mhm.
by the time it's over with, I feel like I'm listening to the same song I started listening to. It's kind of like
Understandable.
there was like a Goat Horror released an album. I can't remember which album it was, but it was like it was pretty cool because the way they did it, it starts off with this riff on their first song, and it ends with that same riff on the
Ah,
12th song. So like
yeah.
if you play it in a loop, it's like it's just a continual cycle.
Uh,
It was a pretty cool idea. I liked
there's
that.
a
I'll
Meshuggah's Catch 33 is kind of like that, where it's like by the end of the album, you don't know if you listen to like one song or the whole album. There was a live performance, I think it was at Summer Breeze, and it just like I think I might have sent you a screenshot or two of it, but like if you get the chance, watch Meshuggah's performance at Summer Breeze of 2024, I think it is. In the comments, you'll be dying. They're so funny. And one comment said like I'm gonna go to Summer Breeze, or like the guy's like saying this from the perspective of like he's telling his parents, and then
right.
they put Summer Breeze, and it's like the Meshuggah show where like they open up with Broken Cog, and the setting for it was so fucking cool. And I showed Sarah it because I'm like, this is just fucking awesome. So of course, it's like a drum beat in the beginning. And then like every single member of the band stands in front of like this red screen, and there's all this fog. I'm like, oh dude, this just looks so fucking cool. And like the audio for it was perfect. I mean, the
Really.
guitar tones, the drums, the Jens Kidsman, I think his name is, their singer.
Hmm.
Everything sounded and they were tight. I mean, air
Mm.
fucking
Yeah,
tight.
they're good.
They played Humiliative live too, and that's one of my favorite songs by them. Just fucking incredible performance. But just like all the comments were fucking hilarious. And one of the comments that did stick out to me was they mentioned like Thomas Hawkey, their drummer,
Hmm.
and he was spot on. But yeah, Jens
He's
Kidsman
he's
didn't
amazing.
miss. Yeah, nobody in that fucking band missed a beat. And those are old dudes too. Like
Yeah, they've
just
been around for a
fucking
long while.
about 30 years. Yeah, because their
Yeah.
first album was like not what was that? Future Breed Machine in 90 or 90. No, no, no. There was one before that, and I can't remember, but it has Humiliative on it, and that's one of my
Hmm.
favorite songs by
Yeah.
them. It was off that first album that came out, and it was like 90 or 91. So yeah, they've been out for a long time and been crushing it every album.
Well, I'm gonna have like my February is gonna be full of music
Oh, that's
because
the way my April is.
yeah, because well, I think I told you this. Like Valentine's Day, I'm going with my dad to see Dream Theater.
Yeah.
And then the next week, me and Buck are going to see Helmet.
Yeah, I remember.
You
Yeah.
know, and so it's like, and Helmet, it's the 30th anniversary of Betty.
Mm.
So that's gonna be cool. That's like reliving my high school days, man. That's when I was a teenager.
Yeah, well, you know what's funny is that it's really funny you mentioned that. Both My Valentine and Trivium are touring together, and they're doing I think it's called the Poison Ascendancy tour, and those two albums came out like 2005, which for me, like that would have been like my high school tour. So
Mm.
they announced that they did it like all over Europe last year, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're coming to America." I'm like, I don't care what is going on. I will put a man on the moon to go to that fucking show because that like those two albums were like me and a bunch of or and a couple of my friends, we were all learning to play instruments, and unfortunately I was the only one that like stuck through with it. We
Mm.
learned like that whole Ascendancy album. We learned a whole ton of Bullet for My Valentine, Metallica, Megadeth, and all that, but like specifically those two albums, Ascendancy and The Poison. Like we loved those albums. So like I'm like, fuck yeah, I can't wait to go
Well,
fucking.
this will be this year is the 30th anniversary of NOLA too by
Oh, that's right.
Down.
Yeah,
And so
you know what I did?
I
Did you see
went,
they're recording new music?
I wouldn't be surprised. Like it
Yeah,
wasn't that
that
long. It wasn't that long
well,
ago. They did the Purple album. Well, it was
yeah.
they had recorded like three or four EPs
Yeah, back
in
in like
like
2012.
2015 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so like in 2005, I drove to Metairie, Louisiana,
Mm.
which is where they're originally from.
Yeah.
Um to a little club there in Metairie outside of New Orleans on Halloween. Me and my cousin went out there and we saw them do the 20th anniversary show of NOLA. And they
Yeah.
played the entire album front to back. It was so
Yeah.
killer, dude.
Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, they literally just announced they are recording new music. So
Awesome.
Rex isn't with them, but it is
No,
Pep.
Rex left before the last album they recorded. So
Yeah,
that was in like 2014. That's when he went and joined that other band. What was that?
Kill
What was
Devil
that?
Hill. No,
Yeah, yeah.
Kill
I don't
Devil
really
Hill.
like them.
Their first album was 2000. You might be a little bit ahead. I think their first album was 2011-ish. Their singer Dewey Bragg was really, really talented. I really like that band, but like I understand where they're like a little bit more grungy. Their second album was a little bit faster.
I
And
found
I
them
think
more to be like hair metal. It sounded more like, to me, it sounded more like Motley Crue-ish than
mm,
anything
I can
else.
see where you're coming from with
You
that.
know, I think grunge, I'm thinking Alice in Chains or, you know, Nirvana.
Yeah,
Like
some of
they
their
didn't really
songs
have
had
that feel to it.
some of their songs had a little bit more like that grungy feel, but some of them I could see where you're kind of coming out with like a Motley Crue kind of, but like their one guitar player was, if I remember correctly, I think it was Warren DeMartini who played in some like 80s hair metal
Mm,
bands. So
yeah,
you had Vinny who played for Black Sabbath at one point, the
right.
drummer, Warren DeMartini who played for some hair metal bands, and then you had Rex. And I think the last thing Rex really put out musically was his solo album, which actually I thought was pretty damn good.
I never heard that.
Smoke
I'm
on
gonna have to
This.
check it out.
Yeah, it came out in 2015 or
I
2017, I
remember
want to
hearing
say.
about it, but I never heard it. Like
Yeah.
I knew it had come out, but I just never listened to it. One of
Yeah.
my okay, so I don't know how much time you spend on Facebook, but I don't know, you know that the page on Facebook, Mental Motivation?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so this guy is a friend of mine in Beatrix. Like
Oh,
and
I think you've told me about him before.
yeah,
Yeah.
his
That's
name's
ringing a bell.
CJ.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so he's good friends with Rex because he grew up in the
Mhm.
Dallas Fort Worth area and
Yeah.
like knew Rex from way back in the day.
Sure.
And so I knew about the album coming out through him. And he said it
Mm.
was a really good album, but I just never
Yeah.
took the time to listen to it.
Yeah, I think you'd really like it. I think right around that time he was talking up ZZ Top, and I'm like, oh, if he's talking up ZZ Top right now, that's got to be good stuff. So yeah, it's definitely it's like a hard rock kind of album. So it's definitely got like the guitar tones are real punchy, which I really, really liked. And then the riffs are catchy, the songs are catchy. It's him singing, and I don't.
Well, he
He
did a
almost
lot of the backup singing for Pantera.
He did, but like his voice almost reminds me of like a Troy Sanders kind of in like Kill or Be Killed. That's kind of what he reminds me of a little
Love
bit. So
Killer Be
like,
Killed, dude.
oh, so good,
They're so
so
good.
fucking good. And you know what? It's so funny because like if you listen to all those respective bands, especially Dillinger Escape Plan, you would never think that like all those guys coming together would be that. And
Yeah.
that's what I love
Oh,
about it
it's
so
so
much.
good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I listened to Dillinger Escape Plan years ago.
yeah.
Yeah. What was that one song I liked so much? Farewell Mona Lisa.
Yeah, that would have been
God, I
off.
love that song.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that song.
It took me a long time to get into them, but One of Us is the Killer was the album. I want to say it was like 2012. And that song in particular, One of Us is the Killer, was what really got me into them. Like that one beat in the song, it's like a just like a standard beat, and they have kind of like this kind of thing in it. And it's like a real soft, jazzy almost kind of song, but they throw that in there, and then like the chorus is really powerful. So and like I always knew Greg Puciato was just a phenomenal vocalist, but it was like after that song, and then definitely after Killer Be Killed, I'm like, all right, I have to reassess where I'm at with Dillinger Escape Plan. Like listening to some of their older stuff, like
Yeah.
they always have like one piano kind of song on every album. Gold Teeth on a Bum is off that same album with Farewell Mona Lisa.
Hmm.
Black Bubblegum is another song that has like a piano to it, and then one of their bigger songs is like Milk Lizard, and just like the way that Greg belts it out at the end is just fucking awesome.
Yeah, I remember going. I remember how I discovered Dillinger Escape Plan was I was at my mom and dad's house. I was hanging out with my dad. We are watching VH1, and
Oh, yeah.
they were doing one of those like rockumentaries, like on metal, right?
Yeah.
And it was like walking through the years of metal from the past to the present day. And one of the last bands that they premiered on there was Dillinger Escape Plan. And
Mm,
they showed him up on stage playing a show. And
yeah.
somebody from the crowd tried to rush the stage, and the guitar player, like hit him in the head with the guitar.
Yeah.
And my dad just looked at me. He goes, I want to go to one of their concerts so I can see people get beat with instruments.
You know what?
And I started listening to them after that. And I think Farewell Mona Lisa was like the first song by them I ever listened to. And I fell in love with that song. Just the
yeah.
rhythm of it and the
Mm,
time signature changes. And it's just like
yeah.
it was such an intriguing song. I listened to that. I think I listened to it solid, nothing else for like 4 days. I just listened to that song.
Yeah. And you know what's so funny is that like their live performances, I'm pretty sure there's an article that you could find where Greg talks about taking a shit on stage. And like I'm not even kidding, like they talk about how nuts they go. There's videos of their guitar player Ben Weinman, who I think plays for Suicidal Tendencies now. He's literally he has the guitar on his arm and he's waving it around like this and then puts it on the other arm, does the same thing. Greg's like climbing on speakers and like jumping like 10, 12 feet high off of shit. I mean, they
Yeah.
do crazy shit live. And it's
Yeah.
so fucking awesome. So like I'm kind of upset I never got to see him, but like they're just remarkably talented. And then like Greg has done some projects after that, so he's a solo band. And then like he even did like an electronica kind of thing called the Black Queen. And
Mhm.
some of the songs on like the first album will remind you of like 80s pop, and it's so good actually.
Oh,
So,
really? Like Old
oh yeah.
Ministry or some shit like that?
No, no, no. It's like
I don't know if
pop
you remember
like
I don't know if you remember the Old Ministry, like
mm,
before they went like industrial metal. They were doing
mm.
like that. They were doing that industrial 80s style music.
Oh no, I'm not
Yeah,
familiar with that at all.
that electronic 80s pop
Yeah.
style. They were
Like
doing that.
you would almost think some of this stuff is almost like Michael Jackson.
Oh,
Like
really?
it, yeah, but I mean, it is really good. So, yeah, I got super into
That's
them after
probably
that.
stuff that Beatrix would like that I wouldn't like care for that much.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing that sticks out to me was, I remember watching, you could find the YouTube video of it. I think it's like crazy Dillinger moments. And like, they're like a mall, and I'm pretty sure they just like do this wicked stage dive into the crowd. And then there's like another video of everybody just rushing the stage to sing. I'm pretty sure it's the end of Farewell Mona Lisa, like just absolute insanity. And I'm like,
Yeah.
man, those shows had to be just like awesome. Oh, now I know the
They
point.
were insane.
Yeah.
They were wild.
The point I wanted to make though is that you mentioned watching VH1 with your dad. How many kids are not going to have that same experience like what I had? And it's similar to what you had, but like just scrolling through the channels on TV, Music Choice, and like Direct TV, going to like the main menu to watch all the music videos and finding all these bands that way. I mean, that's how I found Machine Head, The Absence, Steel Panther. Oh, geez, like pretty much everybody I listen to now just scrolling through TV. Oh, On Earth, and that's one of my favorite bands.
Well, yeah,
I
but now they got like
love On Earth. I remember watching like the music video
oh, we
for Zombie all the different channels, just being blown away by some of the shit I used to hear all the time. So, like, how many kids aren't going to have that? Because like podcasts don't really advertise music, and you know, maybe credit to Rob Flynn because he used to have his podcast, No Fucking Regrets, and at the beginning he would roll through some of, like the person he's interviewing's music. Um, like how many people aren't going to have that same experience of like turning on the TV and then going to the music choice channel and be like, oh man, this band's really cool. Like this riff got me super into this band. Like that's gone.
well, now what you do is you go to like Spotify and you put in a
Yeah.
band you like and it pulls up a whole freaking radio station and just playing these similar style
Yeah.
music. So there's
Yeah.
still, there's still ways to do stuff like that, you know.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, I still find new bands that way. Sometimes I'll just be in a mood.
Yeah.
I want to listen to music. I'll go sit on the porch and I'll turn on a Spotify channel on the Mastodon channel or something like that. And like a band will pop up and I'm like, who the hell is this? This is good shit. Like, yeah, I still discover music that way. So, hopefully kids are too. It's unfortunate though. Like, I was talking to Mano, a while back. about how it's just like there's not this revolutionary movement in music anymore, like what I experienced in the 90s or what my dad experienced in the 70s. You know,
Yeah.
it's just everything's kind of flat now. It's almost like music's become modern, like modern art, like a modern
Yeah.
architecture. It's kind of just lost the whole spirit behind it. There's like no soul left in it, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and that's actually really upsetting. And I think people started to like talk about this 10, 15 years ago, where like people recognize, oh, there's going to be no more Metallica. Like you could say maybe Avenged Sevenfold is kind of in that place, but like they don't have the
They're
nowhere. Yeah,
terrible.
yeah, exactly.
They're
Nowhere near the
terrible.
notoriety that Metallica
they're
has.
not they're not that good. They're not as good.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like they can't
And they're
write
not,
us like,
and see, the thing is, it's like there's very few bands nowadays that are adventurous. And that was
yeah.
part of like what made Metallica, right?
Mm,
Is like or what made Nirvana or what made Alice in Chains or
mm,
the Beatles or any of these like number of these insanely large bands. It was they were experimenting with like all kinds of shit. And
yeah.
there was something unique and like new and fresh about what they were doing. There's nobody's doing anything right now. It's
Yeah,
like they're
I
just trying to recycle. They're like trying to play off the backs of the giants. And instead of discovering the formula, they discovered the notes. And so they're just
mm,
playing the
mm,
notes and there's no formula behind what they're doing. And it's like, no, like the notes aren't what makes it. There's a formula
yeah.
behind it. And so like the only bands nowadays that are releasing like great music are bands that have been around forever, like Tool, Mastodon. I mean, the Foo Fighters still like he could still release music, left and
Yeah.
right. That's just insane. But who's the new, you know, regenerative, revolutionary, you know, gonna change music forever like Korn or Marilyn
Yeah.
Manson or like where's that at? And it's just like that spirit has been completely decapitated.
The first one that comes to mind, and maybe you and I don't get the obsession, but I feel like younger generations probably a little bit more into it. And I hate that I'm even going to say this, but like Sleep Token seems to be kind of like the big thing because I mean and like this was a shock to me because I like them, I don't love them, I don't hear anything that's like to me
Yeah, like
revolutionary.
Chelsea Grim has,
Well, that was
apparent.
like that they've been around for like 20 years. I mean, Sleep
Oh,
Token,
have
like
they
their
been
first,
around that long?
yeah, Chelsea Grin's been around for
Yeah.
a pretty like they were big when I was in high school. But like Sleep Token came out in like 2018, 2019, and then I mean
Mm.
they like soared to the top of the charts. Like they headline like PPG Paints Arena, which is like where Metallica plays. So like I
Okay.
said, maybe this is just passing us by. Maybe there's a side of our age is that we just don't get it. But like that like electronica and metal, I think it's neat. It's not like entirely my deal. Like I'll listen to it and I enjoy it, but it wouldn't be something that I would just explicitly listen to the exclusion of everything else. So like maybe that's a new thing. Like Spirit Box is another pretty big band that's, headlining a lot of bigger tours now. But like,
Mm.
but to your point, I don't think they're really breaking ground. Like you could maybe argue that Sleep Token is because they're finding a way to mix like the beats and electronica with metal.
Yeah,
But
that's what Jonathan Davis was trying to do back in the early 2000s with who
yeah,
was that DJ he was
Skrillex.
Skrillex. Yeah, he was working
Yeah,
with him like a lot, and they were doing stuff together. I didn't care for it. I've heard a couple of like I
exactly.
heard somebody
Yeah.
talking about Sleep Token, and I listened to a couple of their songs. I didn't care for it. I didn't like it, but I mean, if that's the thing, that's the thing. Like my parents didn't like corn,
Oh yeah,
so
exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. This may be. I'm if I had to put it that way, then I would probably say like, yeah, pretty much maybe Sleep Token, and maybe I'm wrong, but like maybe Sleep Token is like this generation's corn. I mean, and to me, that's kind of exciting that like the kid, and it's cool because like they have a gimmick too. So, as much as people kind of want to throw shit at like bands that have a gimmick, so to speak, they dress up in a certain way that looks really weird.
yeah,
And like
they kind of look like Ghost almost.
yeah, but it's like different. Like they paint their skin black and have like these real weird masks. Ghost isn't well, there you go. Like Ghost has been around for a while, but they're pretty big too. So um I also think just like most music is like, I hate to say it, like saturated. Like there's not, I'm sure there's some new ground to be broken, but like, you know, Pantera broke ground when they put out Cowboys from Hell. And then obviously when Far Beyond Driven came out, people were like, you can't get heavier than that. And then, people started doing 8 string guitars and just, you have a Muir now where like the tablature for a Muir is a Cheerios box, right?
I will quote Jimmy Bauer and
Yeah.
say that Jimmy Bauer told me in conversation
Yeah.
2005 in Metairie, Louisiana, when he introduced me to his mother because his
Uh-huh.
mother knew my great grandma,
Yeah.
and he told me there is no one heavier than sleep.
Mm,
And so I wait for the day to hear somebody heavier than sleep. So,
mm.
you know, I was I liked sleep, and Justin Marler, who was the original guitar, well, not the original guitar player, but he was a
Yeah.
guitar player off their first album, has been on Buck's show. He was a he discovered orthodoxy and actually went to and stayed in a monastery for 8 years, become a monk, and he came up with the zine, Deaths of the World zine, that you'll hear Buck talk about sometimes.
Oh
And
yeah, I've heard
yeah,
about that.
and he was one of the first guitar players for Sleep. So hopefully I'll get him on soon.
Nice.
We have texted, and so it's something that we're looking to do this year, hopefully.
Yeah, they're a band I gotta look into a little bit more. Oh, one more point I wanted to
Well,
make. Yeah,
you're up north. Y'all don't do the whole sludge metal, so it
a
may not be
little
your
bit.
thing.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. I mean, like,
do you like High on Fire?
I'd like everything I've heard by them. I liked, but I haven't like gone out of my way to listen to them.
Well, Matt Pike is the same vocalist and bass
Oh,
player.
okay, gotcha,
So
gotcha. Yeah,
at
so
least
like,
vocally, you kind of get the same idea, but
mm,
it's more of a sludge or a doom metal, like more like Orange Goblin or something like that.
sure. Yeah, I
Yeah,
like them quite a
slowed
bit.
down.
Yeah. What's really popular here in like Pittsburgh and like most of the East Coast is like hardcore, like E-Town Concrete,
Mhm.
Terror,
Hate Breed.
Hatebreed, yeah, stuff like that. Like that is like I
I
remember going to
love
shows.
Hate Breed.
Yeah. Well,
We saw Hate Breed with Devil Driver a few years ago.
yeah,
Yeah, that was a great
that's
show. That
awesome.
was a fantastic show.
I remember there was a place called the Roundhouse near where I grew up, and I could like walk there from where I lived when I was a kid. And they used to have hardcore bands come in there all the time. There was like a really big band that played up there. Oh, and there was also like a venue called Planet of the Apes where like Atreyu, Avenged Sevenfold played. It was like a garage in Natrona Heights, which is where like my mom and my stepdad live. But there was a place called the Roundhouse, and they would just have these brutally heavy hardcore bands. And I'll never forget watching some dudes slam dancing. I always thought slam dancing, like hitting people, like full on decking people was retarded. But this dude turned around and he just planted his fist on a table and shattered the glass because he was so into the music. And like in one respect, I'm like, that was kind of awesome. But in the other respect, I'm like, if I was the owner, I would beat the ever loving shit out of you. So, but like that's just what people did up here. And there was
Right.
another place. It was an old skate park called Scumbags. That was it. And yeah, they used to have all the like local bands play down there, and people would get all loud and rowdy. But yeah, shit like that was kind of cool. So, but that's mostly what people did up here in North is like hardcore was a big fucking
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody out there listening to this that I didn't have any clue as to what we're talking about, go watch American History X. And there's a scene in a barn where they're
Mhm.
playing like hardcore music and slam dancing, like old
Mhm.
school freaking going to town with
Yeah.
kicking and punching. And yeah, that shit was wild. That was actually really big in the punk scene down here in the South back when I was in high
Mm.
school.
Okay.
So we would go to like punk shows, and that like we would go to a metal show, we'd be moshing, right? But
Yeah.
you go to a punk show and they'd be hardcore dancing. That's what we called it. We called it
Uh,
hardcore dancing. We didn't call it slam dancing. We called it hardcore
uh,
dancing. So yeah,
yeah.
and so because a lot of the believe it or not, a lot of the sludge metal bands came out of more of a punk scene than they did a
Yeah.
metal scene, even though they sound more metal. So like I Hate God, Mike Williams was more of a punk fan, right?
Yeah.
And he actually released a punk band, him and it was him, Hank the Third, and Phil Anselmo.
Oh, Super Joint Ritual.
No, Arson Anthem.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Arson Anthem, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that
Phil
was
played
just
guitar
that
in
was
that
a
band.
straight old school punk. Yeah, Mike Williams
Yeah.
was singing, Hank the
Mm.
Third was on drums, and then Phil played guitar. Yeah,
Yeah. Talk
yeah.
about a fucking ass backwards fucking lineup.
Well, but Jimmy Bower, the drummer for Down, was the guitar player for
Yeah.
I Hate God.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I mean, it
Didn't
was
he? Didn't Jimmy Bauer play in Super Joint too?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
He played guitar for Superjoint.
Yeah. Was he the drummer on the first album? I swear I remember watching the music video for the
I don't
Alcoholic, and he was
no.
playing drums. Maybe I'm wrong
Hey,
though.
maybe he was. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I
I
don't
know he
know.
played guitar too, but
Yeah,
he also
he played guitar before he started playing drums.
yeah,
And to
didn't
me, he's
he
a better drummer.
yeah. Didn't he did like a country album too, didn't he, Jimmy Bauer? I remember
Maybe,
I think he did like a single or
possibly.
something.
I mean, he's an
Yeah.
old coon ass man. He's like he spends that dude was had dentures by the time he was 30. He like all he does when he's not playing music, he's out on the freaking river fishing for catfish. I mean, he's an old
Mm.
coon ass. He is like he ain't got no sense. He's from Iowa, Louisiana. Like most
Yeah.
people couldn't find Iowa, Louisiana on a map, and they would
Mhm.
pronounce it Iowa and not Iowa.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned that because like now I'm thinking about like Zach Wild. It's funny, Zach Wild actually like grew up right probably like 4 or 5 hours away from where I live, and then he had that Berserkus this past year, and I'm kind of mad I didn't go because it was only like 3 or 4 hours away from me, and I was free that weekend. My brother messaged me, he's like, "Dude, we should go," and I'm like, yeah, that'd be pretty cool." And I just didn't. But they had like a Blackstone Cherry, who's really good. They're kind of like a newer, just like rock band. They had some like tribute bands too. So like they had the Iron Maidens, Atomic Punk, which obviously listeners can kind of figure out what kind of tribute bands these are, and Clutch played there too, and Cody Jinks, who like out of like all the newer country, most newer countries like that stupid fucking cousin fucker rap, and I can't stand that shit. Cody Jinks is like a legitimate country artist, and he's super into metal. Like I remember him talking about like,
my
yeah,
favorite
man.
my favorite Shooter Jennings. Waylon Jennings' son,
Mm.
Shooter Jennings. I love his music.
Oh yeah, what's funny is Steve, my bass player, their other band, Slant Six, had actually opened for us, Shooter Jennings. And I
Oh,
remember he's
really?
like, "Yeah, man." He was like, "Dude, we brought like busfuls of people down to go see him." And it was like Slant Six and then Shooter Jennings. So yeah, they said it
Nice.
was a real cool show. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to give you an idea, like Jimmy Bower's from a little town called Iowa, Louisiana, just outside of Lake, probably like 30 minutes outside of Lake Charles.
Mm,
And okay, so my family's all from Lake Charles, right?
mm,
So my cousin used to have a band and they were opening up for Jimmy Bower's cousin's band.
uh,
But their drummer had it was right after Hurricane Katrina
mm.
and their drummer's house got flooded out, so he was out of the state, so Jimmy filled in for their drummer, and so my
Mm.
cousin actually got to open for Jimmy Bower. So
Ah, yeah, that's awesome. Well, what's funny is I'm sure you might remember this name, but Nick Catanese. Nick Catanese, the former guitar player for Black Label
yeah.
Society, was actually from here in Pittsburgh. And people used to tell me all the time, specifically my band members even, they were like, "Yeah, we used to play with Nick's old band Racer X and some of the other bands that he used to play in all the time." As in 12ish, but like yeah, all the people that I play in bands with now all had nothing but good things to say about Nick Catanese. And yeah, they always said they used to play with him. There was a venue in New Ken, which is like right where I grew up, and they said they always used to play in bars with him there, and that he was always like a really good dude. So
Well, we're lagging more so than we're not now at this point in time because it's gotten so
mm,
dark out here and my internet's unstable whenever it gets dark
mm.
out here. So go ahead and plug whatever you got to plug, man, and we'll just call it quits on this one. We
Yeah, for
covered
sure.
we covered two of the three subjects I had written down to cover. So we did all right.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think 66% is still passing. So
Yeah, yeah, we did okay.
yeah, anyways, yeah, in Liberty and Health, 1 day a week. This month's lineup, I don't know when you're planning on releasing this, but we mentioned Buck. Buck's gonna be on my show. Let me make sure I got this date right.
This will
Yeah, the
come out a
fifth.
week from today, so next Thursday.
Okay, so then by the time you're listening to this, make sure you go check out my show, which will have aired yesterday on the 15th. I'm having our dear friend Buck on, and then the week after, I'm actually pretty stoked for this. Orrin McIntyre is going to be on the show on 22nd, and
Nice.
big surprise to me, he digs my band, and I have no idea how he found out about me or my band. I said something to him on Twitter, and like I used to say, I didn't get like shitty with him, but he just like frustrated me with some of the stuff that he said. Like he replied to somebody underneath me, and then like right after that, he said, "That being said, Kyle's band is pretty good," and I'm like, a motherfucker knows the way to a motherfucker's heart. So I don't know if it was Red Hawk or Pete or if he just found it on his own, but I was pretty fucking stoked about it.
That's
So
cool.
I'll fucking take it. So, anyways, he's gonna be on the 22nd, and then on the 29th, I have our dear friend Sam Urban coming on. So I'm doing a whole dissident right month pretty much. So I'm really looking forward to kind of the way this month's gonna play out. And then Common Crown. If you were in the southwestern Pennsylvania area, we're opening for Cultist Black on February 9th, and we're opening for Lynch Mob on February 26th. So
Cool.
yeah, next month's gonna be pretty cool. And obviously, go subscribe to 5 Till Midnight. Tommy, you've been a guest. And that's Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I got to get back on there, man.
Yeah, we'd love to have you.
I love shows like that because then I can just talk shit.
That is the only purpose of that show is just for us to talk shit and occasionally have a topic.
I was just on Bird Show. He had me he published it over Christmas. So Red Hawk messaged me after that. He was like, "Oh, dude, you were in Namibia. That's awesome." He goes, "Oh, I love going on safaris and stuff like that." So I got to get, I guess I got to get back on Twitter and see if he messaged me back because I did respond like after a week.
Mm.
I finally responded to him. Sorry, Red Hawk. I'm terrible about Twitter, dude. Get my number from Kyle. That's the easiest way to reach me. Just text me.
Yeah, he's a good dude. So I'm sure I'll see him again. But yeah, go check out the Old Glory Club too, because that's as I always say, my favorite right wing organization in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. They do some good shows. All right. Well, I'm going to stop the recording.
Cool, man.